The thing is that there was so much here, and when I started pondering it, it was so gigantic, this mystery, that it has been affecting all of our lives since the moment we were born. I mean, this is the mystery behind the rise and fall of the economy, the crashing, when Wall Street crashes, even the rise and fall of nations, when America rose, what may be the fall of America. It is so precise that, as far as I know, it's the only source, or the only thing in existence that actually gives the dates, not just the times of the greatest crashes of Wall Street, but the actual dates down to the hours of when Wall Street crashes. And this is long before it ever happened. So the mystery of the Shemitah goes back 3,000 years. And it begins on Mount Sinai, actually, when the law of the Shemitah comes to Israel. And what basically was this: every 7 days was a day, but every 7 years, most people don't know, was a Sabbath year. And that year was called the Shemitah. And during that year, it's a total economic rest. There's no sowing, reaping of the land. There's no buying or selling of the fruits of the land. And on the last day of the Shemitah, it is called Elul 29 in the Bible. Elul 29, that's the date. On that day is a complete wipeout. All debt is wiped out. All credit's wiped out. And the financial accounts of the nation are wiped clean. So now this was supposed to be a blessing. But the Shemitah turns from a blessing to a sign of judgment or calamity on a nation that has once known God, turned against his ways and turned away, and that comes and strikes the financial realm, economic realm, and the nation's sustenance. So the big question is it possible that this mystery is actually in effect now, that it is affecting every part of our life, that it has affected our past, our present, and will affect our future? And the answer, the mystery of the Shemitah, is the revealing. The answer is yes, it is affecting us right now.
And, if you take a look at 2001, we had the tech, the 9/11, just not long before that, we had the tech crash, I think, 2001. Right. And then you look at 2008, and, that was a huge financial calamity. I was working at CNN in late 2007 and 2008, and the math was terrible. But, of course, that's a man thing, not a God thing, and God way outranks the math. And now we're talking 7 years in future, so 2008, 2015, and we're looking at, if the Shemitah is correct, and I know you think it is, we're looking at some kind of fallout this fall. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Shemitah is correct, but the only question, and this is where I don't want to be dogmatic, but I want people to be aware and be warned. And the last two have been so exact. I mean, it's not just that there was a crash at that time. What you have is, in the greatest stock market day crash, point crash, up to that day is in September 17th, caused by 9/11. That day that it crashed is Elul 29, the day that's appointed in the Bible. That's the exact day when you have to wipe out financial accounts, and that becomes a sign of warning of a nation under judgment. So you got the exact day, September 17th, Elul 29, not just Elul 29 that happens once a year. Elul 29 that happens once every 7 years. And then that record holds for 7 years until you get to the great crash of the Great Recession, the greatest crash in history, September 29th. They go into the New York Stock Exchange, ring the bell refuses to ring, they take it as a sign. That day comes the greatest crash in American history. When did that take place? On Elul 29, the exact same day, and not just Elul 29, the exact day, the wipeout day of the Shemitah, that happens only once every 7 years. So the two greatest crashes up to those days happen exactly 7 biblical years apart, down to the day, down to the hour, down to the minute. That, Greg, is how exact this thing is. So that would make me say, even though I'm not dogmatic, we need to be aware. We have entered a year of the Shemitah now. And the pattern of the Shemitah is that generally the beginning of the Shemitah it's very undramatic. But there are at times signs, and I believe this time we have some very significant things that are signs of what's to come. But if something is going to happen this cycle, then the pattern is it happens at the end of the cycle, or the end of the Shemitah, and that, as you said, that focuses around the time of September, which is the Hebrew month of Tishri, which, by the way, is the time when the greatest day crashes in history have taken place. So everything is converging, and there's a lot. Even the harbingers are converging. So everything's converging around this time. So though I'm not dogmatic, I believe we need to be ready, and that's why I believe I had to write the mystery of the Shemitah, that people need to be ready. I believe a great shaking is coming, and whether it happens in the parameters or around the parameters or after, doesn't matter. A great shaking is coming to America, and we need to be ready.
You talk about an illusion. You talk about the illusions of this recovery when we have 93 million people that are no longer counted on work rolls, 46 million people that are on food stamps, 13 or 14 million people who are unable to work, who are injured, who are on disability. But I want to read this to you. I want you to go step by step on this. It says, you say in the Shemitah book right here, you say, the day of Shemitah's coming illusions are exposed. In the day of the Shemitah, coming illusions are exposed. Entanglements are broken. Pride is humbled. The gods, that's a lowercase g, little g, the gods are judged. Idols are wiped away. I want to start with the coming illusions are exposed. Are we living in a big financial illusion in your estimation right now?
Yeah, I believe we are. One of the things that the Shemitah brings is, again, the wiping away of these things that have been built up that are really a house of cards. I mean, it's a wipeout phenomenon. And that happened in 2007 and 8, as we talked about before. It's happened before. The Great Depression, by the way, is also linked to the Shemitah, and all these things are. But yeah, I believe we have a house of cards. We had that in 2007 to 2008, and everything was wiped out, and we said, oh well, now we're not going to do this anymore. Well, we've gotten worse since then. Example. People are aware of this. One of the things of the Shemitah, and this is from 3,000 years ago, is that it deals with debt. When there's debt, that phenomenon is stronger. Well, what I've noticed is there are certain times when this phenomenon is stronger than other times. And the key times, if you look at the phenomenon of the Shemitah, are the 1930s. This thing has been in effect, for modern times. 1930s, where you have the Great Depression, and you have another depression in 1937. And then the other time period is from the 1970s onward. And those two time periods, what is the key between them is those are the times when America's debt has been at its peak. And we are now, this debt level, this house of cards, this debt is astronomical. We have not learned the lesson from before. And what that would tell me is that it tends to be that when that level rises, the phenomenon of what's coming with the Shemitah is all the more powerful. And so that I believe, a great crash, we're going to see this collapse of this house of cards. And I believe that's exactly what it is. It's a house of cards.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jonathan Cahn, the math sure backs up you and God. And we know we've got $18-something trillion. We're growing it, according to John Williams, at $6 trillion a year. That's all total commitments. According to the Bank of International Settlements, back in the last crash, we had, 600 or 700 trillion dollars in derivatives. Now they come right out and say it's a quadrillion, it's 1,000 trillion. So what you're saying about the debt, bigger than ever, you are correct, sir, and you can do that on a math problem. And you're saying, and I wanted to say something else too. I wanted to get into this. You say, and what people are probably sitting out there right now is saying, what should I do? And you actually address this in the mystery of the Shemitah, and it says, you say in there, what should I do in view of the coming calamity? And then you give this Bible verse, a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. Why did you include that verse, and what does that mean?
Well, I believe that that's part of it. What it means is that if you know that calamity is coming, then you take precautions. A wise man doesn't just say, okay, it's coming and I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to hide my head in the sand. I'm going to do something. And so I'll put it this way. And first, the mega picture or the meta picture, and this goes with a harbinger, also is there's a pattern that this phenomenon, the Shemitah and more, that if a nation has been so blessed and absolutely blessed by God, turns away from this, what happens is the blessings are removed from that nation, and it's the signs of judgment, and all these signs of judgment. One of the things about the harbinger is that what it's saying is that there are specific signs of judgment, 9 signs that appeared in the last days of ancient Israel that are now reappearing on American soil. So all and in precision, some of them involve the president and leaders, but they're happening in precision. So and since the book came out, the harbinger, they've continued to manifest. So this all comes, the Shemitah, the harbinger, all come together. What is the first thing is give a few different levels of preparation. The first thing is that, and I'll say this outright, that if you are listening to this and you're not right with God, get your life right, because that's what these things. America is rapidly accelerating in a moral collapse and a spiritual collapse. I mean, that's part of the picture. And so you've got that. I mean, the economic follows that. So we've got that. And so the point is that get your life right with God. And I'll also say that I'm a minister. If you're not born again, get born again. Doesn't matter what your religion is. Number two, the Bible also says that, as you said, a prudent man prepares. Well, what do? I'm not a financial advisor, but I'll speak for myself. I believe that in this time period, first of all, if you have anything linked to the stock market, I mean, unless you have some supernatural knowledge or some amazing knowledge that there's some way, in general, I would not be putting my stock in the stock market, number one. Or have things that you have attached to it. A lot of people don't realize that their pensions may be attached to the stock market. Number two, I also believe that we should have essentials, meaning that it is a wise thing, we're talking about a prudent man, a wise thing to have essentials in store, that if there is a collapse, and if there is the collapse not only of the markets, but of infrastructure, of services, if these things should break down, that you would be okay for a time period. And so, and the worst case scenario is there's no worst case scenario, and you've got stuff that you can use anyway. So I believe it is wise. I'm not a survivalist, I'm more of a revivalist. But the point is, I do believe that we should be wise in all things. The key here in practical terms is safety. Safety. That's the key. I would not go with things that are risky, but safety. I would not put my trust in a house of cards.
I tell people all the time on my site, I said, listen, go out and buy food and water. It's cheap insurance. If you don't use it, if you don't have to use it, you can always just use it up, or it's not that much money. Now, you buy car insurance and you pay $500 every 6 months, and at the end of every 6 months you say, oh, I didn't have a wreck. Yeah. Oh, I got to go out and buy some more insurance.
Exactly.
I mean, $500. You spend. Some people say, "Well, I get this question a lot too about poor people, about people not very poor." I tell them, "Do you have a data package? Good, get rid of it. Do you have cable TV? Yeah, cut it off. Do you have a car? Start riding a bike. Take all that money and divert it into buying food and water." Am I telling them wrong?
No, I don't believe you are, and it's exactly what you said. I mean, we spend $10,000, $12,000 on health insurance. If anything goes wrong, exactly what you say. We don't complain if we don't get sick. But the point is, and this is much less than that, but these are basics for life. I mean, we should have this anyway, I believe. This is basic to stay alive. And the thing is that, if we're saying that always these things are always going to work perfectly, I don't believe they're always going to work perfectly. I believe, again, we are at the verge of collapse, and you need to have, I believe, enough just to get through that time, not in fear, but the most important thing is get right spiritually. Secondly, then be a wise man or woman and do what is wise in view of such things, which I believe you should have anyway. One of the mysteries of the Shemitah, it's not only the financial realm and the economic realm, but this mystery actually pinpoints changes in world history, and even there's a whole section called the Rise and Fall of Nations, and you can look at the history of modern history and see when the Shemitah comes, at key times comes world change, comes global cataclysm, comes World War I, comes World War II, comes the Cold War, comes the rise. It's about the collapse of nations. The word Shemitah in Hebrew can also mean collapse, literally, and can mean the fall. And so we watch, actually, America's rise has been timed to the Shemitah. And so the thing is that, during a Shemitah year, something major can happen. Now, I'll give you an example of something that already happened that most people missed. I mean, you probably didn't miss it, but most people did. And that is that within 2 weeks of the Shemitah, 2 weeks, the American age, which began in 1871, which is when America became the strongest economic power on earth, and this has lasted ever since then, over 140 years, that age came to an end. China surpassed America for the first time in more than the 20th century. So I believe that's a foreshadow or a warning of where things can go. The mystery of the Shemitah with Israel, when Israel totally rejected God, totally turned away from its foundation, it actually was destroyed. So what I'm saying is this. One of the things about, for instance, Bible prophecy is that when you look at the end time prophecies, you don't see America as prominent. So it means that somehow there's going to be a change from America being the head of nations to something. And I've warned about this for a long time. Well, I believe this. I believe that if we don't get back, if America does not return to its foundations and in God, that the American age entirely will come to an end. We will not be the head of nations in any way, and we will go through very hard times.
Do you think we get a big fat war in the Middle East with this ISIS? I mean, they're doing dreadful things. They're cutting off the heads of Christians. You know, they took them down to the water, I guess, so they wouldn't have much of a mess to clean up, and they cut off 21 Christians' heads. I mean, it's outrageous. Do you think we're going to end up in a big nuclear war?
That's a great question. Well, there's two things that most people don't realize about this with the Middle East. One, and this goes back to the first thing is this pattern of a very specific pattern of warning and judgment. In the Harbinger, the second Harbinger of the 9 Harbingers that appeared in ancient Israel is the Harbinger of the terrorist, and that is that the first warning was a strike on the land that was done by terrorists. Literally, the Assyrians who did this in ancient Israel were the fathers of terrorism. They invented it. And the thing is, ISIS is like a descendant of that. And the thing is that, but the pattern is, first comes this strike on the land, it's limited, it's a wake-up call. But then as the nation does, if the nation doesn't turn back, after a number of years, this happened with ancient Israel, it gets re-engaged with the terrorists, and now comes an even greater calamity. Well, so I was always watching since the Harbinger, is America going to get re-engaged with another form of, or with a terrorist, with the same thing, because that's the pattern. Well, ISIS, amazingly, ISIS comes from the same exact spot that the ancient Assyrians do. This is the beginning of the Harbinger pattern. They actually claim Syria and Iraq, which is ancient Assyria, the same people that brought judgment to ancient Israel. This launches the Harbinger sequence. That's number one. Number two, the ancient Assyrians were known for being bloodthirsty. They mutilated people, and that's exactly what ISIS does. And the ancient Assyrians were especially known for beheading their victims and then putting them on display. And that's exactly what ISIS does. ISIS is like the reincarnation of ancient Assyria. So I believe this is ominous. And not only that, they took over Mosul, which is the capital of ancient Assyria. They now have the capital of this. So it's kind of like a replay. And the other thing, Greg, is there's a mystery I put at the end of the book, the mystery of the Shemitah, which is called the mystery of the 7th Shemitah, which is going to link up with the Middle East. And that is this. Every 7 years is the Shemitah, but every 7th Shemitah is a super Shemitah. 49 years ushers in the 50th year, which is called the Jubilee. And in the Jubilee, what happens, interesting, is that there is a restoration. If you lost your land, you get restored. If you lost your father's home, you get restored to your inheritance. It says everyone shall return home and they'll receive back their inheritance. Well, there's an amazing thing about end time prophecy. It says that these things can't happen until Israel, Middle East, Israel comes back to the land. The Jewish people come back to the land, or you cannot have end time prophecy. Well, the amazing thing is this mystery of the 7th Shemitah actually gives the exact time when these things have to happen. For instance, 1917 was the year of the Shemitah. In that time period, Israel is restored to the land. The British Empire gets Israel from the Turkish Empire, gives it to Israel, says return home. It's the restoration returning home. Well, if you count 70 or 7 sevens to the next 50th year or Jubilee restoration, the mystery of the Shemitah brings you to the year 1967. 1967, Israeli soldiers enter Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is restored. They come back to their ancient possession of Jerusalem, which is, still the controversy of the news. Well, the interesting thing, Greg, is that if you follow this mystery, and I'm not again saying it has to always continue, but the question is, when's the next 7th Shemitah? It is right now, 2015, and the period that would indicate, if something's going to happen, that there could be a major event in the Middle East, major war, but that results in something prophetic, is the period of September 2015 to September 2016.